It may have taken the gaming world by storm, but growing up, I didn't have the same connection to Tetris. Lots of people got to experience the game as a pack-in title for the Nintendo Game Boy in 1989. I got my Game Boy in the mid-90s, and that was well after the initial Tetris fever had been cured for most Americans. Instead of falling in love with puzzle games on Nintendo's handheld, I actually really started to enjoy them from the comfort of my own living room, by matching sets of 3 colored gems with Sega's Columns. Sega's Columns is a simple game. An assortment of 3 gems fall in a single line into a well. You cannot rotate them, but you can shuffle their order and decide where they're going to land. If you connect 3 or more of the same colored jewels, you eliminate them from the well and earn points. Unlike Tetris, gravity pulls the gemstones into an ever-growing radiant collection at the bottom of the well, and once that well is full, the game is over. But a playing field full of jewels means there's opportunity for huge combos as gems fall down once their supports are removed, and that makes way for a bunch of chain reactions that are incredibly satisfying to watch. Columns was originally created in 1989 by Jay Gearstein, who developed the game for several different home computers at the time, like the Macintosh. These original computer versions were great proofs of concept, but they needed some polish. In 1990, Jay Gearstein sold the rights to Sega, who turned it loose in arcades, now complete with a shiny gemstone look and a sort of old-world charm. The arcade gameplay of Columns is the basic mode of play on the Sega Genesis version of the game, where 1 or 2 players compete for higher points side by side. While there isn't any interaction between the 2 players in the game, it's incredibly fun to see who can survive the longest and pull off more points, and even pull off cooler combos. Starting at higher levels earns you more bonus points, but newcomers to the game can utilize hints for the first 3 levels of the game by starting off on the easy setting. Arcade mode in Columns is pretty simple, but I really like the other modes available in the Genesis game. There's a basic original game that, for a single player, centers the playing field and allows you to fine-tune the difficulty settings and even turn on a 3-minute time trial. You can play this original version of Columns with 2 players as well, which allows both players to customize how many colors of gems they'll have in play, as well as the overall difficulty and starting levels. Missing from this version is the Magic Jewel, which is a saving grace item from the arcade mode that eliminates all the gems in the well that are the same color as the gem the Magic Jewel lands on. There's also Flash Columns, where the goal is to eliminate the flashing gemstones in the playing field rather than shoot for a higher score. If you're into puzzle games with a specific goal, then Flash Columns is the mode for you. Similar modes would eventually appear in games like Tetris as well, and in a way, Flash Columns is not unlike the goal of matching pills with viruses in Dr. Mario. While the arcade mode, original game, as well as Flash Columns all have side-by-side 2-player modes, none of them are truly a game of competition with someone else. That's why I love the doubles setting, where 2 players take turns controlling the falling gems in a single playing field. You're still competing for points, but now players have to decide to go for bigger matches and combos, or to try to hinder the next move by the other player. Columns is already incredibly simple, but having both players manage the same well of gemstones can make it for an extremely competitive game, where you have a real impact on the performance of the other player. I love this game. The simple nature of Columns made it easy for my younger self to understand, and by keeping the focus on matching gems, rather than trying to fit pieces together like Tetris, kept the focus on making matches and combinations, something that I would later love in games like Puyo Puyo and Dr. Mario. As a kid, I thought the gems and jewels would twinkle right off the TV screen. I liked the flowery language on the box to connect this game to one that was played by Middle Eastern merchants because it added to this sort of mythological appeal that the game had, even though Columns is just a match 3 style falling block game invented in 1989. My mother and brother would always play this game with me on the Sega 6-pack, which was the coolest collection of games on the Genesis for a kid. But Columns was also available as a standalone cartridge too. I even got my brother to play again with me for this video, and it brought out some of that competitiveness between us again, just like video games did to us over 20 years ago. Columns would go on to be a pack-in title for the Sega Game Gear, but came out far too late to truly stand up to Tetris on the Nintendo Game Boy. Columns 2 would only be released in Japanese arcades, but featured changing graphics and playing fields as if you were traveling through time. The original Columns would also be ported to many other computers, the Sega Master System, and even non-Sega home systems, including the PC Engine. While these versions were not exactly handled by Sega, Sega still owned the rights to Columns, and outlets like Media Factory even got the game onto Nintendo platforms in the late 90s. Columns was a hit, but it was always in the shadow of Tetris and more action-packed and better party games like Puyo Puyo. While other Sega Genesis owners probably played Columns, it was hard to compete with newer puzzle games with more competitive two-player gameplay. That's where Columns 3 comes in and shakes up everything. Apparently the Japanese Mega Drive version of Columns 3 wasn't American enough because they gave us this Seinfeld-looking reject dude. I mean, this guy even made his way onto the advertisements. How much do you think they paid him? Whatever it was too much. Columns 3 has a small semblance of a story with you exploring an ancient pyramid looking for treasure, or pyramid. You're stopped by creatures of the pyramid and have to battle them to move on, and the battling takes place, as you'd expect, in the form of games of Columns. Unlike the original game, Columns 3 has you compete with another player in an all-out survival mode. Whoever fills their well up first loses. As you match gems, you earn points that can be spent in multiples of 10 to send a crush bar to the other player. This will add blocks to the bottom of the well, making their playing field just a little bit tighter. You cannot hold more than 3 total crushes at a time, but there's a whole new element of strategy introduced with this, as sending an attack to your opponent also reduces your own crush bar, and a well-timed crush bar attack will also destroy any gems currently in play, including magical jewels and powerful flashing gems that cast spells on the other player when part of a match. These spells can stop you from rotating your columns, turn the playing field upside down, or even turn your gems black and white, which is actually a lot more disorienting than you'd think while playing. There's a host of items available in the single-player game too to help you out of tough situations, but nothing beats playing legit and trying to outwit your opponent the old-fashioned way. While playing against the CPU in these puzzle game fights is always fun, the real fun in Columns 3 is the multiplayer. The crush mechanic carries over from single player, and competing against a real person is much harder than competing against a machine. Trying to draw each other out by spending crush bar attacks or distracting them with flashing stone spells makes for an incredibly fun round of puzzle game action, and the multiple stages and music make Columns 3 a lot of fun to play again and again. When you hook up the Sega Team Player, you can even have Columns rounds for up to 5 people at once, which looks just as crazy as it sounds and plays even crazier. Columns didn't stop changing things up either. In Super Columns on the Game Gear, you could rotate your columns to the side, which completely changes how the game can be played. But the computer characters are not programmed to do this. I honestly don't care for Super Columns that much. Maybe some 20 years of Columns is burned into my brain, but rotating the pieces just seems wrong. This function wouldn't find its way into any of the other Columns games, which continue to come out in Japan for several years, with only a handful ever finding their way stateside, such as Columns Crown on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. This time, instead of a certain Game Boy Color game, fully officially coming from Sega. Columns Crown is okay. I mean, in all of these games, Columns is Columns. The core game really hasn't changed from version to version, but Columns Crown features another weird backstory that it doesn't make any sense, and the backgrounds for the gameplay I think are actually really distracting. I guess I also just think that the ancient mythology or ancient Mediterranean style that Sega added to the original arcade Columns is the best way for the game to be presented. It has a charm that fits with the magic jewels in the game, while this sorcerer kid and generic fantasy Cupcake Land or whatever is going on in Columns Crown really just doesn't do anything for me. With so many different versions of the game, Columns' simple nature meant it could be enjoyed by anyone, at any skill level, and on almost any platform. From the arcades to the PlayStation 2, to the Game Gear, to the Game Boy Advance, Columns is a game that doesn't need that many crazy updates with each new version of it. And that simplicity has helped make it so much fun to play, no matter how old the core gameplay is. Sega's Columns is one of those games from my childhood that I know I look back on with a huge tilt from nostalgia. Playing games with my mom and brother isn't something that really gets to happen a lot anymore. And those memories of the early 90s, sitting in front of an old tube TV and playing this game with my mother, is something I look back on fondly. While my brother and I played all sorts of games together as kids, getting to play Columns again with him brought me back to a simpler time, with games like Columns 3 especially bringing out a sense of competition we haven't shared since boyhood. And even today, I still turn on the original Columns on the Sega Genesis as a puzzle game of choice to wind down after a long day. It doesn't matter to me that Columns will always be outshined by games like Tetris, or that Sega's kind of given up on it at this point. Columns will always be one of my favorite puzzle games, and those sparkling gemstones will always find a way to get me to keep playing time and time again.